Today we're going to be talking about the Ford Maverick, specifically the 2022 Ford Maverick Lariat. We'll go over a little bit of history and context surrounding the truck, we'll talk about the specs, we'll go over interior and exterior features, we'll talk about the known issues and the recalls that have affected the car in the past, and we'll also talk about pricing and what to expect to pay for one of these. Now before we get the video started, this specific truck right here is listed for sale on our website, privateauto.com, the for sale by owner marketplace that gives you transactional tools to buy or sell a car anytime, anyplace. Let's talk about some history and context surrounding this truck. Now before 2019, Ford's smallest pickup truck was the Ford F-150. However, that did change that year when they announced the Ford Ranger. Then 3 years later, they decided to release a smaller version, the Ford Maverick, Ford's first ever compact pickup truck. When it first released, demand for this thing was so high they actually had to stop taking orders for it, which meant if you wanted one, you had to wait for the 2023 model. I mean, demand for this thing was pretty dang high. A Ford pickup truck for under $30,000? That was kind of crazy. Like I said before, this thing is smaller than the F-150, this thing is smaller than the Ford Ranger. In fact, it was actually built on the same platform as the Ford Bronco Sport. Now that's about as far as the history goes. The car is only like 2.5 years old, but because it's 2.5 years old, you're going to start to see the first wave of used cars hit the market. Alright, let's get into some specs here. There are two different engines you can find in the Ford Maverick. You can find a hybrid engine, which is standard, and then you've got the option to upgrade to a gas version. The standard engine is a 2.5 liter hybrid engine that only comes in a front wheel drive configuration. This gives you a combined 191 horsepower with about 150 pound-feet of torque. The upgraded engine is an inline 4-cylinder 2-liter turbo that is gasoline, not hybrid, that gets you about 250 horsepower, which gets you 277 pound-feet of torque, a massive advantage over the hybrid engine. If you want all-wheel drive, you're gonna have to go with this gasoline engine. You can't get 4-wheel drive in the standard hybrid version. Your gas mileage will be about 22 miles to the gallon in the city and 28 on the highway. Meanwhile, the hybrid engine will actually get you 42 miles per gallon in the city and 33 on the highway. Kinda crazy for a pickup truck. It's a bit of a trade-off. You'll either get power or you'll get fuel economy. Take your pick. Now let's take a look at the exterior. A lot of smaller trucks tend to do something a little bit different with their design, at least compared to the larger versions. The Honda Ridgeline has that infamous tailgate design, and the Hyundai Santa Cruz has something similar. However, that one looks more like a crossover than it does a pickup truck. The Maverick, on the other hand, looks like a perfectly normal standard pickup truck, just smaller. And I can appreciate that. It's got a boxier, more like stout look to it. On the driver's side, you'll get the standard Ford number pad, the one where you input a password to open it up, and then push 8 and 9 to lock it. And on the rear tailgate panel, you'll have a stamped, more modern looking panel with the word Maverick kind of underneath it. You'll have more modern looking black trim around the car as opposed to like chrome. The bed is 4.5 feet long with a load capacity of 1,500 pounds. Now, if you want to tow something, the standard towing capacity of this little guy is 2,000 pounds. However, there is a variation, an optional upgrade that you can add that allows it to tow up to 4,000 pounds, which is kind of nice for a little pickup truck. Moving on to the interior, the Lariat trim comes with these standard faux leather seats, with the front two being heated. Along the doors and the dash, you'll actually get a different colored trim depending on what color your seats are. So for example, if you have the brown leather seats, you'll kind of have the brown trim accents along the door and along the dash there. And speaking of the doors actually have a pretty nice large cup holder for like more larger water bottles, which is kind of nice. Something worth mentioning, this car does have a lot of random storage places. For example, right next to the cup holder, you'll have expansive storage kind of down to the right of it, but then you'll also have like a little cubby to the left of it, something kind of cool. You'll also get like an interesting little cubby space right next to the display. And at the front, you'll have an 8-inch touchscreen, which has a basic infotainment system, so like stuff like radio and Bluetooth connectivity, but it is Android Auto and Apple CarPlay compatible, which I think is the most important part. Now, the front dash is pretty simple. You've got 2 gauges on the gauge cluster with a screen kind of in the middle. It'll display information like tire pressure, fuel economy, etc. Now, another thing worth mentioning is the gear selector is actually a dial instead of like your typical transmission handle. So instead of a column shifter or kind of like your traditional stick shifter, you'll actually have this rotary dial that you can turn to select different drive modes. And then something even more interesting about that is no matter like what gear you're in, if you're in reverse, drive, low, high, if your foot is on the brake and you're at a stop and you open the door, the car will automatically put itself into park. And then the parking brake is also electronic as well, so instead of a lever you'll have like in the middle console or like a lever kind of on the floor, it'll actually be a button right below that gear selector dial. Alright, now let's talk about some of the known issues and recalls that you might have to look out for. Now, because this car is pretty new, not all of the problems and the bugs have been discovered. It hasn't really been put through its paces yet. Now that's something to keep in mind when looking for a used version of one of these trucks. Now with that in mind, here are some of the known issues with the Ford Maverick. Now, as far as I can tell, some of the serious problems more so affect the hybrid, so there are a couple of these that are just exclusive to the hybrid version. For example, there was a pretty big recall issued that addresses an issue where the engine could potentially catch fire. I have seen some instances where some people have some issues with the battery, but again, that might be anecdotal, and those problems did seem to be exclusive to the hybrid powertrain. And now here's some issues that potentially affect both of the models. There was one recall that affected the drive shaft, another addressed an issue with the gas tank leaking, and then there were other recalls that addressed airbag issues. Then I guess there are a bunch of other software recalls, but most of those have been fixed with over-the-air updates. And now keep in mind, not all of these issues and recalls affect every model. I'll put a link to Ford's webpage where you can actually check each individual VIN number to see which recalls have affected that specific model and if they have been addressed or fixed or not. And generally with recalls, any parts or labor that affect the recall are covered by the manufacturer at no cost to you. Now let's dive into some pricing. Another thing that makes this compact pickup truck stand out is its price. In 2022, the base trim of the Ford Maverick launched at about $22,000 MSRP. Now that is amazing for a pickup truck. The XLT trim or the middle trim went for about $24,000, and the Lariat trim, which is the top trim, started at $28,000. Now this is one of the reasons why the car had such huge demand. And if you wanted that extra towing capacity that I mentioned earlier, the one that doubled the towing capacity from 2,000 to 4,000, that upgrade was only about $800. So that's something else to keep in mind when looking for a used one of these. If someone tries to upsell you on the price because it has the tow package, just don't let them take advantage of you. Now, because this truck is only 2 years old, we're actually just now starting to see the first wave of used cars hit the market. So you can expect pricing to be pretty similar to MSRP. I would say probably within a $5,000 difference. Right now, the current estimated projected 5-year resale value is expected to be around 70%. So you can kind of use that figure to calculate a more precise price. Now, one other thing to mention, we are in a weird period of time where used cars are actually more expensive than cars just rolling off the factory line. For example, a common price for the Ford Lariat trim right now is about $31,000 to $32,000. Now, if you find a car much cheaper, definitely check its history because it could potentially have had some issues. Shameless self-plug, our website does give you a free vehicle history report with your listing. So in all, just keep an eye on the market, see what other cars are selling for that are similar. Make sure you're not paying too much over MSRP. We don't want dealers thinking they charge too much over MSRP for too long, am I right? Now as time goes on, the supply demand should even out better. And if you're looking to buy one of these right now, that's kind of what the numbers are looking like. Now some final thoughts. I feel like this truck could totally fill a niche. Say you live in a city, but you want a pickup truck, but then you don't want to have to deal with a massive pickup truck when navigating a densely packed city. Now you could go with the Ford Ranger, but those are kind of pricey, and you don't really want to deal with the size of an F-150. Then suddenly the Ford Maverick becomes a very attractive choice. It's a foot shorter than the Ford Ranger, much smaller than the F-150, and it comes at the price of around $20,000 to $30,000. This could also fill a role where someone wants a truck, but they don't need that much truck. If the quality of the truck stays consistent, I can totally see this thing taking off. Alright guys, that's about it for me. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and stay tuned because we'll be doing one of these videos weekly.